For many centuries, the Ottoman Empire stretched far into 3 continents, ruling over people who spoke many languages and practiced a variety of faiths. Their most iconic warriors were the Janissaries. They formed the empire's elite infantry, as well as units of cavalry. Many also held positions as influential bureaucratic civil servants. The Janissaries are often credited with having an instrumental role in the empire's rise, as well as its decline. The formation of the Janissaries took place during the early days of the Ottoman Empire. Originally, they were a small bodyguard unit of archers, charged with protecting the Ottoman Sultans. What may seem very strange at first glance, and possibly second as well, is that these early Janissaries were captured Christian slaves and prisoners of war who were pressed into service. The first of these were captured Byzantine soldiers, who were then supplemented by additional slaves captured on campaign, or purchased at slave markets chosen for their physical fitness. At this early stage in their development, the Ottoman Janissaries were by no means historically exceptional in their unit composition. Captured enemy combatants, foreign mercenaries, and slaves were often preferred as bodyguards by many ancient kings, pharaohs, Roman emperors, emirs, and caliphs. Throughout history, the most likely candidates to prematurely end the life of a sovereign were his family and the nobility, and those they had influence over. A foreign bodyguard, unfamiliar with the nuances of a local language, was far more unlikely to take part in palace intrigue, or care at all about the concerns of the common people. And as you might imagine, the prestige and quality of life in a royal bodyguard unit was quite high. Early Ottoman sultans were not content with this ancient and proven system, and sought to improve it, because semi-autonomous feudal Turkic cavalry formed the backbone of early Ottoman armies. They were fantastic warriors, but not unquestioningly loyal to the Sultan. To centralize military power under his control, the Sultan needed a counterbalance to the traditional cavalry, and began to transform his bodyguard unit to accomplish this, with 2 goals in mind: to increase the total number of troops, making the small bodyguard unit an army, and 2, increase the quality of the troops while increasing their number. To accomplish this, the system of recruitment was radically overhauled. Adult prisoners of war and slaves were gradually phased out of recruitment. Every 5 years, a representative of the Sultan traveled to the Balkans and collected a human tax. 1 child over the age of 8 out of every 40 Christian rural households was taken to be raised by a Muslim family and then be trained as a Janissary. Households with only 1 son were exempt from this form of tax, or kidnapping, as well as all children from cities, who were viewed as too streetwise, insubordinate, and lazy. The potential Janissary spent the first few years with his new family learning to read, write, and speak Turkish fluently, as well as Islamic law, cultural customs, and norms. After this was completed, the young man was taken to the capital city, where he underwent intensive physical and mental examination. Those with particular ability were set aside for specialized roles. All Janissary cadets trained for 6 to 8 years in wrestling, weightlifting, horsemanship, and the use of all manner of weapons. The young cadets were expected to stay celibate during their many years of training. Those unable to meet the high standards of the Janissary Corps were removed. Once the cadet's training was complete, and he became a full Janissary somewhere in his early 20s, a full course of indoctrination had been completed in solidifying loyalty to the Sultan. They referred to him as father, and he to them as my sons. When the Sultan went to sleep each night, 50 to 100 Janissaries did the same nearby on the floor. Although it is technically correct that they were slave soldiers and property of the Sultan, that stated alone may likely give the wrong impression. The social status of Janissaries was far higher than that of other slaves, and even the vast majority of free-born Ottoman subjects. They were well paid and had a generous pension upon retirement. Fine new clothes and uniforms were bought for them at least once a year. You cannot have the Sultan's sons looking shabby. Throughout Ottoman history, many Janissaries occupied the highest positions in government, even that of Grand Vizier, which was second in power only to the Sultan. The Janissaries' recruitment method, that was seen as kidnapping and a curse initially, became viewed by many as a blessing. Many parents, including Muslims, began paying bribes to recruiting officers to take their sons. Life as a Janissary offered an opportunity for social advancement, and a chance that some money would trickle back home. As the empire grew, so did the ranks of the Janissaries, which were transformed from a small bodyguard unit to a professional standing army. At the Battle of Varna in 1444, when most of the Ottoman army had routed, the Janissaries stood their ground. and turned defeat into victory, bringing the severed head of the Hungarian king to the Sultan. Less than a decade later, the ancient Roman capital of Constantinople was taken, where the Janissaries carried out the decisive final assault on the city's walls. The Janissaries had many more illustrious victories. During the 15th century, the Ottoman army arguably became the first in the world to widely adopt artillery and handheld firearms. And by the early 16th century, most Janissaries were armed with arquebuses instead of bows. A major change came for them in 1594, when those born Muslims were officially allowed to join for the first time. This was primarily done to let the sons of Janissaries join, and throughout the 17th century, the old system of procuring children from the Balkans was done away with, and the Janissaries gradually moved closer to becoming a hereditary warrior elite. As their political power increased throughout the 18th and early 19th century, their military prowess declined. Sultans that tried to limit their influence were removed. In 1826, Sultan Mahmud II disbanded the Janissaries after a violent clash. Thousands were killed in their barracks that was shelled with artillery. Survivors who had opposed the Sultan were rounded up and executed, and so ended the Janissaries.